Today we speak of the greed of the soul. We often hear of men who marry many wives, but have you heard of the woman who wove 2 webs and was strangled by her own silk? This is not just a story of love, it is a story of the great deception. It is about a girl who had a heart of gold that turned to rusted iron when she crossed the great salt waters of the ocean. In the land of our fathers, we say that a person who pursues 2 rats at the same time will surely go home hungry. Jessica was a hunter who thought she was cleverer than the elders. She thought she could bridge the gap between her past and her present by building a bridge made of lies. But remember, a bridge of lies may look strong, but it cannot carry the weight of the truth. Listen closely. If you have ever been tempted to hide a secret, or if you have ever wondered if the grass is greener on the other side of the world, this story is your mirror. Let us travel back to the secondary school corridors where it all began. In the village of memories, some names are carved in stone, and others are written in the sand. For Jessica, Tun's name was carved in the very marrow of her bones. They were the children of the morning sun, 2 bright sparks in the bustling world of secondary school, promising each other a future before they even understood the true weight of a vow. Their love story wasn't one of grand gestures, but of shared textbooks, stolen glances in the classroom, and whispered dreams beneath the shade of the mango tree during break time. Tund, with his quick smile and even quicker mind, was the star student, always pushing Jessica to excel. "When we finish university," he'd say, holding her hand, "we will build our home, just like the elders tell the stories of old, strong and true." Jessica would simply nod, her heart swelling with a certainty that felt as deep and ancient as the earth itself. They were inseparable, a vision of young love that made even the most cynical teachers smile. Their friends knew, their families suspected. Everyone believed that Tund and Jessica were destined to walk life's path together, forever bound by the golden threads of their youth. The ink on their secondary school certificates was barely dry when fate, a trickster spirit, decided to weave a different pattern. The world, as they say, is a market and people come and go. Just after graduation, a sudden, unexpected opportunity arose for Tund's family. They were relocating to the distant shores of America, a land of dreams and endless possibilities, but also a land that felt terribly far from Jessica. The farewell was tearful, filled with a fresh batch of promises. "I will write every week," Tund vowed, his eyes mirroring the ache in Jessica's heart. "Distance means nothing to a love like ours." For a time he kept his word. Letters arrived, filled with descriptions of snow and skyscrapers, of new challenges and unyielding affection. Each letter was a lifeline, a tangible piece of Tund across the vast ocean. Jessica cherished them, rereading them until the ink faded, the smell of his presence clinging to the paper. But as months turned into a year, the letters grew fewer. Then the messages stopped altogether. The silence was not a sudden cut, but a slow, agonizing fade, like a distant drumbeat growing softer until it was swallowed by the night. Jessica wrote, she called the old family number, but her words seemed to vanish into the same void that had consumed Tund's. Her heart, once a vibrant garden, began to wither under the relentless sun of unanswered questions. The proverb says, "The river does not stop flowing because of a single stone." Life, in its relentless wisdom, continued to move, and so did Jessica. Her university years were a blur of studies and a quiet melancholy that lingered like a shadow. She excelled academically, burying her heartbreak in textbooks and late-night revisions, yet a part of her remained adrift, a ship without its anchor. It wasn't until her National Youth Service Corps, NYSC year, a mandatory service to the nation, that a new breeze began to stir the leaves of her life. Posted to a quiet town in the east, far from the bustling memories of her youth, Jessica found herself in a new environment, new faces and new routines. It was there, amidst the communal life of the NYSC lodge and the camaraderie of fellow Corps members, that she met Patrick. Patrick was not Tund. He was calm where Tund was fiery, steady where Tund was dynamic. He had a gentle way about him, a kindness that radiated from his eyes, and a laugh that was both infectious and comforting. He saw the quiet strength in Jessica, the hidden vulnerability, and slowly, patiently, he began to plant new seeds in the barren soil of her heart. Patrick understood the quiet pain that sometimes flickered in Jessica's eyes, though she never spoke of Tund. He never pushed, never demanded explanations, simply offered a steady presence. Their friendship blossomed naturally, nurtured by shared duties at their place of primary assignment, late-night conversations under the stars, and the simple joy of discovery in a new town. He was her confidant, her companion, and gradually, without either of them quite realizing when the shift occurred, her heart's new compass. Patrick showered her with a quiet, consistent affection that was a stark contrast to the whirlwind passion of her youth. He was there, he was present, He celebrated her small victories and offered solace in her minor frustrations. After the unpredictable storm of Tun's disappearance, Patrick was the calm harbour she desperately needed. His love was a warm, steady hand in hers, guiding her away from the echoes of forgotten promises and towards a future that felt tangible, secure, and wonderfully real. He made her laugh again, a full, uninhibited sound that had been absent for too long. With Patrick, Jessica began to believe in a future where stability was not just a dream, but a living, breathing reality. 1 year after their NYSC service ended, the inevitable question came. Patrick, true to his nature, did not propose with fireworks or grand public spectacles, but with a heartfelt sincerity in the quiet intimacy of their shared apartment. "Jessica," he began, holding her hands, "my heart knows no other home but with you. Will you be my wife?" For Jessica, the answer was yes, a resounding affirmation born of gratitude, respect, and a deep, abiding love that had grown from the ashes of her past. She had found peace with Patrick, a sense of belonging that healed the wounds left by Tun's sudden silence. Their wedding was a beautiful affair, a celebration of two families uniting, of new beginnings, and of a love built on trust and presence. The village rejoiced, seeing in Jessica a woman who had weathered storms and found her calm. Patrick was everything she needed, a devoted husband, a loyal partner, and a pillar of strength. Jessica had truly embarked on a new path, one she believed was divinely ordained, firmly rooted in the present and looking forward to a bright, shared future. She had closed the chapter on Tund, or so she thought, for fate, as often happens in tales of old, was merely setting the stage for another, far more complicated act. Marriage to Patrick was a calm sea. For 2 years they lived in a harmony that many envied. Patrick was a man of his word, he worked hard and treated Jessica like a precious jewel. However, a small part of Jessica's ambition remained hungry. She applied for an international scholarship, a dream she had nurtured since her university days. When the email finally arrived, it felt like a gift from the heavens, a full scholarship to pursue her master's in the United States. Patrick was her biggest cheerleader. Though his heart ached at the thought of being apart, he held her hands and said, "Go, my wife, this is the hand of God. I will wait for you and soon I will join you there." They spent her final weeks in Nigeria clinging to one another, making plans for his visit, and promising that no ocean could ever drown their love. Arriving in America was like stepping into a different dimension. The air was crisp, the buildings touched the clouds, and the loneliness was immediate. For the first few months, Jessica was a model wife. She called Patrick every day, complaining about the cold and telling him how much she missed his cooking. But America is a place that brings back ghosts. While settling into her campus in Maryland, she found herself constantly reminded of the dreams she once shared with Tund. Every time she saw a tall, dark-skinned man in a winter coat, her heart skipped. She told herself she was just homesick, but deep down, the unanswered why of Tund's disappearance began to itch like a healing wound. She began to search for him on social media, just out of curiosity, or so she told herself. It happened on a rainy Tuesday. After weeks of searching, a profile picture stopped her breath. It was Tund. He looked older, more rugged, but it was him. Against her better judgment, she sent a simple message. "Tund, is this you?" The reply came within minutes. "Jessica, I can't believe it." What started as a hello turned into a marathon phone call that lasted until the sun rose. Tund's voice was full of a pain she hadn't expected. He told her how his father had intercepted his letters, how his phone had been seized, and how he had been told she had moved on and married someone else years ago. He had spent years trying to find her, only to give up when his heart couldn't take the silence anymore. The truth was a heavy weight. Tund was living only 2 hours away in Virginia. He was successful, single, and still deeply in love with the memory of the girl he left behind. Jessica stood at a crossroads. She should have told him about Patrick. She should have said, "I am a married woman now." But the nostalgia was a powerful drug. She missed the girl she was when she was with Tund. When they finally met in person at a small coffee shop, the chemistry was an explosion. Tund looked at her with such worship that she felt she was back in secondary school. In that moment of weakness, she didn't mention her wedding ring, which she had tucked into her purse before getting out of the car. She let him believe she was the same girl who had waited for him. The deception grew like a weed. To Tund, she was the long-lost love who had finally come to join him in America. To Patrick, she was the struggling student who was too busy with exams to video call frequently. 6 months after arriving in the States, Jessica did the unthinkable. She told Tund she wanted to be his forever. She changed her Nigerian SIM card, telling Patrick she was having network issues and would call him from a new work number. In reality, she used that new number to coordinate a secret life. With no one in the States to tell Tund her truth, and no one in Nigeria to tell Patrick her lies, Jessica walked down a small aisle in a quiet civil ceremony. She married Tund, while Patrick's wedding band was still hidden in her jewelry box. She was now a woman with 2 husbands, 2 lives, and a ticking time bomb in her heart. Life became a frantic dance of time zones. Jessica lived by 2 clocks, the American Eastern time of her life with Tund, and the West African time of her marriage to Patrick. In Virginia, she was the doting wife of a rising professional, attending dinners and planning a future in a suburban home. But every evening she would lock herself in the bathroom or stay late at the library to call Patrick. To Patrick, she was the sacrificing wife, enduring the hardship of distance for their future. She had to remember which lie she told to whom. To Tund, she was an orphan with no close ties in Nigeria. To Patrick, she was still the daughter of her people, sending small remittances back home to keep up appearances. The stress began to manifest as a constant, dull ache in her chest. Technology, which was supposed to bring people together, became Jessica's greatest weapon and her greatest fear. She owned 2 phones, kept in separate compartments of her bag. One was filled with photos of her and Tund at the Grand Canyon and fancy restaurants, the other held the wedding photos of her and Patrick in Lagos. She lived in constant terror of a stray notification. One night, while sleeping next to Tund, her Patrick phone vibrated under her pillow. The muffled sound felt like a gunshot in the silent room. She sat up, heart-hammering, cold sweat drenching her nightgown. Tund stirred, asking if she was okay. "Just a nightmare," she whispered. It wasn't a lie. Her entire life had become a waking nightmare of her own making. The financial strain of her deceit began to show. She was receiving money from Patrick, who was saving every kobo of his salary in Nigeria to send to his struggling wife, and she was living on Tund's generous allowance in America. She felt like a thief. Every time she spent Patrick's money on a dress to wear for a date with Tund, her soul felt a little more stained. She tried to stop the flow of money, telling Patrick she had found a high-paying campus job, but he insisted. "You are my responsibility," he would say over the grainy video call. Seeing his tired, honest face on the screen made her want to scream the truth, but the comfort of her life with Tund, the reclaimed dream of her youth, acted as a silencer. Tund was no fool. While he worshipped Jessica, he began to notice the inconsistencies. She was often distracted, her eyes constantly darting to her phone. She refused to link their social media accounts, claiming she wanted to stay off the grid to focus on her thesis. One afternoon, he found a small embroidered handkerchief in her laundry, a piece of her NYSC uniform she had kept as a memento. It had the name Patrick faintly written in permanent marker on the corner. When he questioned her, she broke into practiced tears, claiming it belonged to a deceased cousin. Tund hugged her, apologizing for his suspicion, but a seed of doubt had been planted in the fertile soil of his mind. The turning point came when Patrick called her with ecstatic news. "Jessica, my heart is jumping, the God of our parents has done it." Through his own hard work and a bit of favor, Patrick had secured a visitor's visa to the United States. He had planned it as a grand surprise, but he couldn't keep the joy to himself. He told her he would be arriving in 3 weeks to spend a month with her. Jessica felt the world tilt on its axis. The 2 worlds she had fought so hard to keep separate were now hurtling toward a head-on collision. She tried to discourage him, citing her heavy exam schedule and shared dormitory rules, but Patrick wouldn't hear it. "I don't need a hotel," he laughed. "I just need to hold my wife." The news of Patrick's visa was like a death sentence wrapped in a celebration. Jessica spent the next 48 hours in a state of frantic motion, her mind spinning like a trapped bird. She couldn't tell Patrick not to come without sounding suspicious, and she couldn't tell Tund she needed to leave for a month without a monumental excuse. She began to craft a desperate plan. She would tell Tund that her scholarship required her to attend an intensive live-in research seminar in a different state, New York. Simultaneously, she told Patrick she had moved to a tiny, strictly no-visitors student hostel in New York to save money. She was building a house of cards in a hurricane, praying the wind wouldn't blow. Jessica traveled to New York 2 days before Patrick's flight was scheduled to land. She used the last of her savings to book a cheap, cramped Airbnb in the Bronx, far from the polished life she lived with Tund in Virginia. To Tund, she sent photos of the New York skyline, claiming she had just checked into her university dorm. To Patrick, she sent the address of a public park nearby as the meeting point, claiming her hostel was too hard to find. The physical distance between her 2 lives was now several hundred miles, but the emotional distance was non-existent. She felt Patrick's presence in every vibration of her phone, and Tund's love in every "I miss you" text she replied to with trembling fingers. The day Patrick arrived, the air in New York was biting and cold. Standing at the arrivals terminal of JFK Airport, Jessica felt like an imposter in her own skin. When she saw Patrick, wearing his heavy Sunday coat and carrying a suitcase full of Nigerian spices and dried fish for her heart broke. He ran to her, lifting her off her feet in a massive embrace that smelled of home and honesty. "My Jessica," he wept into her neck. "God is good." For a moment, looking into his eyes, she forgot Tund. She forgot the secret wedding in Virginia. She was just a wife reunited with her husband. But then, her second phone, the one Tund used, buzzed in her pocket. The vibration against her thigh was a cold reminder of the crime she was committing. The week in New York was a masterclass in agony. Patrick wanted to explore, to take photos, to celebrate their reunion. Jessica, however, was a nervous wreck. She constantly steered him away from popular tourist spots, terrified that a classmate or a friend of Tund's might see her. Every time Patrick tried to post a photo of them on Facebook, she would snap at him, claiming she wanted to keep her professional image clean until her graduation. Patrick, ever the patient man, was confused but compliant. "America has changed you, Jess," he said one night, his voice tinged with a sadness that pierced her. "You are here, but your spirit is somewhere else." Back in Virginia, Tund was starting to feel a different kind of unease. Jessica's video calls from New York were always short and always taken against a plain white wall. One evening, he tried to surprise her by ordering a lavish flower delivery to the university department address she had given him. An hour later, he received a call from the delivery service. "Sir, there is no one by that name registered in this department's research seminar." Tund sat in their quiet living room, the silence deafening. He looked at the marriage certificate on the mantelpiece. A cold, logical part of his brain began to connect the dots he had ignored for months. He didn't call her. Instead, he opened his laptop and began to search for a name he had seen once on a handkerchief. Patrick. Tund was a man of the digital age, and he knew that everyone leaves a shadow online. He searched for Patrick on social media, narrowing it down to Nigeria. It didn't take long. He found a profile, a man named Patrick who had recently posted a series of glowing photos. The caption read, "Finally reunited with my beautiful wife in New York. God is faithful." The woman in the photos, laughing in front of the Statue of Liberty, was Jessica. She was wearing the same scarf Tund had bought her for her birthday. The world stopped turning for Tund. The betrayal wasn't just a spark, it was an inferno. He didn't scream. He didn't cry. He simply packed a small bag and bought a bus ticket to New York. While Patrick and Jessica sat in a small diner in the Bronx, sharing a plate of fries, they were unaware that Tund was only blocks away. Using the landmarks in Patrick's public photos, Tund had tracked them to the general area. He waited near the entrance of the cheap Airbnb he had identified from a background shot in one of Patrick's videos. He sat in his car, watching the door like a hunter. At 7 p.m. he saw them. They were walking hand in hand, Patrick laughing and leaning in to kiss Jessica's forehead. Jessica looked happy, a sight that twisted the knife in Tund's heart. He stepped out of the car, his shadow lengthening across the pavement. "Jessica," the voice was low, but it cut through the New York traffic like a thunderclap. Jessica froze, her blood turned to ice water. She turned slowly to see Tund standing there, holding his phone, the screen glowing with the photo of her and Patrick. Patrick, confused, looked from the stranger to his wife. "Jess, who is this?" he asked, his voice full of protective instinct. Tund stepped closer, his eyes burning. "I am her husband," Tund said, his voice trembling with rage. Patrick let go of Jessica's hand as if it had turned into a viper. "Husband, I am her husband. We were married in Lagos 3 years ago." The two men stood staring at each other, then both turned their gaze toward the woman who stood between them, shrinking into herself. The confrontation moved inside the cramped Airbnb, and the air became thick with the stench of lies. Jessica wept, her secrets pouring out of her like a broken dam. She confessed everything, the silence of the letters, the loneliness in America, the greed of wanting the past and the present at the same time. Patrick sat on the edge of the bed, his head in his hands, realizing that the woman he had sent his life savings to was a stranger. Tund stood by the door, disgusted that the high school sweetheart he had waited for was a thief of hearts. "You didn't love either of us," Tund whispered. "You only loved the way we made you feel." By midnight, both men had walked out, leaving Jessica alone in a room filled with the scent of Patrick's Nigerian spices and the echoes of Tund's broken promises. In the end, Jessica lost everything. Patrick returned to Nigeria and filed for an annulment, his heart hardened against the memory of the woman he once worshipped. Tund disappeared into the vastness of America, never speaking her name again. The scholarship was revoked when her personal life collapsed into legal battles over her marital status. As the elders say in the village, the bird that tries to fly with two wings from different eagles will eventually fall to the earth. Jessica had tried to weave two webs, but she ended up strangled by her own threads. This is the story of the woman who married two husbands, a reminder that while love is a beautiful garment, honesty is the only thread that keeps it from unraveling. And so, the sun sets on a broken home, leaving behind a lesson for all who seek to build their joy on the foundation of a lie.